Hey everyone, welcome to Let's Talk Med, where we talk about our personal pre-med experiences, interesting medical research, and lifestyle with experts. I'm your host, Parsa Valdez, and in this session, we actually had the pleasure to have Ryan, who is a third-year medical student at Harvard Medical School, and also a part of the best family at Delta Epsilon U, Ohana, come in and talk with us and share his advice on not only like the pre-med journey, but lifestyle and balance as well as his personal experience. Not only was it super insightful, but it was also very entertaining and relatable. So come in and tune in for our amazing conversation. Yeah, I am an Ohana. Damn, yeah. You know Tristan?
I do know Tristan.
Yeah, Tristan's my big. Yeah, so I'm super close with him. I know, yeah. I was like...
Crazy. Wait, so what class are you in?
Xi class. Yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah. I know. It's funny. It's crazy how... And once this quarter is over, I'm a sophomore, and it's just like, wow.
Yeah.
The year's gone by so fast.
So you're a freshman currently right now?
I'm a freshman right now, yeah.
How are things going?
Freshman. Yeah, it's going amazing. I was going into it, I was a little bit nervous about the whole pre-med stuff and kind of figuring everything out, but I don't know, it's just all it's all kind of figuring itself out, and everything is going amazing.
That's awesome. So you're doing
you're in
general ed classes and whatnot.
They're going good. I enjoy them. Yeah.
And stuff like that.
I don't like I hate it. I don't like it. I'm not gonna lie. Gen Chem was so boring. I didn't like it. I like OChem. It's a little it makes you think, but it's I don't know. It's just I feel like it's a lot fun. It's
You're like a problem solver.
Fun yeah. With Gen Chem, it was just math. It was okay. I don't know. I didn't like Gen Chem.
That's fair. That's fair.
So you're in Harvard, right?
Yeah.
I remember meeting a couple of times. Did you, I guess when you were in undergrad, did you find or know someone who kind of helped you throughout your undergrad years, finding a mentor or someone like that who was able to help you?
That's actually a really good question. And I think there's a couple ways to answer that. I gotta put a plug out that no person is an island, and we all have gotten here because of the multitude of people who've kind of cared.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I have to thank my family, and I have to thank my close friends and my teachers.
Of course.
One of my actually closest mentors was Dr. Soljak, general chemistry teacher.
Okay.
And these folks aren't I would say mentors in the traditional sense where they told me what to do, but they were more life mentors, and they gave me aspects to succeed. So that's one aspect, right? So I had mentorship in many forms, but I would say on another side, I definitely felt like I was missing, at least for a good amount of my time at Santa Clara, a significant amount of medical school specific mentoring.
Yeah.
A lot of it I had to figure out on my own. And a lot of it, was, spent, scrolling through Reddit or
I understand that. I understand
that. Talking, anecdotally to maybe people who've gone through.
Yeah.
We had one, person who was 3 years ahead of me, so senior when I was a freshman. His name was Dinkel, and he was at the CU EMS, and he went to Harvard Medical School. And
wow.
I was like, well, if this guy can do it, and he went straight through, I feel like anyone could do it. He's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But that was kind of the first kind of whoa, this is like a possible thing. You know what I mean? But I want to say a lot of people do find it difficult to find people to guide them.
Yeah, exactly.
There's not really a set path, and if you don't go to if your family's not in medicine, my family's not in medicine. I have an older brother. Right, yeah. I have an older brother who's in medicine, but he's the first, and so there was no kind of longitudinal curriculum within my family.
Exactly.
If you don't have that,
right.
It's hard,
Yeah, no, I feel that, especially talking with some other pre-med students. At least for me personally, my family is an engineer, they're all engineering and stuff like that, and so we didn't really know, or I don't even know much about pre-med before I even came here.
Right.
And kind of the only reason I was able to understand anything was just through them, getting people who are third years or juniors, seniors. So I'm glad I guess that's kind of the similar thing. As far as when you picked Harvard as your to attend, what were the factors or decisions that went into picking something that's the right fit for you?
that's another
Other than it's Harvard.
it's Harvard, right? It's I actually so when
Yeah.
I applied blind. I actually applied and I
Okay.
didn't know my MCAT score. Typically, when folks apply, they know exactly what their stats are and how they match up. And I actually didn't know how I was going to match up. I took my MCAT very late, and I applied without knowing my score. And so I applied very broadly. I applied to schools that had lower average GPAs and then schools that had higher GPAs like Harvard.
Yeah.
And my mom actually pushed me to apply to Harvard. And so, when I got in, it was unbelievable. And I think when it comes to choosing a school, now that I've kind of gone through the process and have mentored
Yeah.
other people, the most important thing is a culture is culture. So finding a culture, and this is something that you pick up either by reputation or by the students you meet there or when you interview there. But culture is the most important thing because a culture where students, seem to be happy, where they have a lot of free time, where it's pass fail and it's not competitive and there's a lack of gunnership.
Yeah.
Those are all things that help you to thrive. And Harvard, to me, has all those things. There's a distinct lack of, I would say, competitiveness here. There's a pass fail culture, which also has that. There's a lack of internal rankings.
Yeah.
And those aren't really things that you kind of consider. But if you are given the choice, right, definitely look at culture. Geography is very important too. Are you the type of person who thrives in cities and needs to be, out where there's, a lot of energy, liveliness? Maybe you're like a person who likes to go out and that's what, gives you relief. Maybe you like nature, right? And you want to be more on the West Coast. Maybe family is important to you. So geography is very important.
Okay.
I weighed in as well. I knew I didn't want to be in the South or like Tennessee, just because or very cold in the Midwest, just because that's I'd rather be on East Coast, West Coast. That was kind of more of my style.
Okay.
So geography is a big one. Price is a big one as well. Debt is significant, and there's a lot of talks federally about repealing some of the financial aid that certain schools are getting. And so that's something to consider. It's like, how much is a school willing to give you? Is there scholarships available, public, or are they private? Because, medical school students go into upwards of $200,000 in debt. And, you will be making a doctor's salary, but, that's quality of life.
Right, yeah.
So, and quality of life is driven by your spending habits, right? And so, looking at financial aid, is it available? Is there reduced tuition? That's important. And then I'd say cloud. Cloud is important for a couple reasons, and I hate to talk about cloud because it's so whack. But there are certain specialties, unfortunately, and this is kind of just the truth of it, right? That will unfortunately bias themselves towards cloud-tier institutions. And what a cloud-tier institution, if that's even a word, provides for you is access to mentorship, right? These are people who are known in their field. If you want to match orthopedic surgery and you go to Harvard Medical School or Yale, you'll be with orthopedic surgeons who are known in their field, who are innovating.
I see, okay. So you kind of have an upper hand?
Exactly. They'll write you letters of rec, and those will be received by residency programs. They'll also be able to get you access to research that's cutting edge, and more people will read that, and that goes on your residency application as well. And then finally, right, and it is a flaw of medical education for sure. But certain programs just have the resources and that hidden curriculum to funnel people into certain specialties. Whether that's because their hospital does a lot of throughput for them, and so if you're a rotating student, maybe you just see more ENT cases and you just have that exposure. So that's kind of some of the factors that kind of go into why you would choose a school. But ultimately, you go to any school, you'll become an MD or a DO, and you'll become a practicing physician. And the MD and DO, they go hand in hand, and ultimately you're a doctor, and that is a lot. So.
Okay. That's really good advice. That's not even something I've heard about. I've been on a couple panels, so that's kind of changed my perspective a little bit. As far as like you mentioned, certain medical schools are specialized with, like you said, some are more leaning towards, you said, surgery or something like that. Others more towards clinical care. if someone didn't know what specialty they necessarily wanted to go to, and like if they're looking on this like clout-based like factor,
Yeah.
what would you like recommend them do? Would you recommend like they kind of like stay away from that side or still kind of look into it, as compared to like someone like I know some of my friends are super interested in neurosurgery. I mean, we're freshmen, so like obviously
Yeah,
everything
yeah,
is
yeah,
bound
yeah.
to change. But what would you recommend for people who don't necessarily know like what specialization like they would want to
Absolutely.
go to?
I want to put a disclaimer out there. I think
Please, yeah.
no matter where you go, you can end up in any specialty,
Of
right?
course, of
No
course.
matter where you go. Even if you went to, in the middle of nowhere in Arkansas, you could end up in the most highest prestigious hospital in New York as a neurosurgeon. Now, the paths to getting there can be a little more difficult, and the work on your end might need to increase. So I'd say, for right now, don't think about your specialty. Think about what's most important at your stage is thinking about the reasons that you want to go into medicine, because that will reflect on the activities you do. That will reflect on the patients that you encounter, and most importantly, that'll reflect on how you write your personal statement and how you conduct your interviews. And
Yeah.
ultimately, your personal statement and your interviews are really what schools are looking for, right?
Right.
They're looking for someone who is committed, to medicine, and wants to, go in it for the right reasons. So I'd say even like at this stage, right, it's good to like, want to pursue something like, surgery right now, or if you're in family medicine, like try to stick to that path. But I'd say keep a very, very open mind.
Of course, yeah.
Keep the most open mind and focus right now on kind of what actually drives you to go into medicine as a whole. Now, to answer your question more strategically, right? Let's say like you did have the option between several schools. The first thing that you want to look at, right, is what your own focus is. So if you're gonna want to practice in a community setting, you would want to practice immediately in that medical school, right? So if like you are going to be going back, let's say you're from a rural area and you want to go back home and that's your job and you want to do primary care there, and you want to serve that mission, I would say like go to that local school, right? And like consider like with all the other factors of like cost and geography and location, if it works
Yeah.
out, like go to that school, because that's what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. You're going to be seeing those types of patients and exposing yourself to the local problems of that area. If you are undifferentiated, I think that, and this is personally what I value, I think that going to a school that is quote unquote more prestigious just gives you more time and more options.
Okay.
And that's kind of what prestige buys you, like options and the ability to be flexible and switch around. Because let's say you go to a prestigious school known for ear, nose, and throat surgery. It's probably easier to go from that school and decide you hate ENT and go into family med than it is to go to a school that doesn't have a research program in ENT and then try to go into ENT once you decide you don't like family med. Does that kind of like make
No,
sense?
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And then yeah, please go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, no. So
Oh.
I guess in like summary, right? I think cloud is overrated, but it
Okay.
does buy specific things, and what it buys is options.
Okay.
Options.
And it kind of like makes that path easier, I guess, if you decided to stick with it in
Exactly.
a sense. Okay.
Options, flexibility, and resources. But you can get those anywhere if you work
Yeah.
hard enough and you make enough connections and know the right people.
Okay. And then as far as like kind of going back to the reason why you chose Harvard Med, is there like a certain specialty or something, or like that clout factor that had an impact on your decision to go there? Or
Absolutely. So,
yeah,
um,
I'm not sure like what your interests are as far as
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. A little background about myself. So I'm
Please,
from
yeah.
Honolulu, Hawaii,
Okay.
and my mission, I guess, like the reason why I wanted to pursue medicine, is because I have very, very strong ties to the Pacific, and I think the Pacific Ocean, and when I talk about the Pacific Ocean, I mean like Micronesia, Polynesia, and Melanesia. So all the way from like Papua New Guinea to Hawaii to Guam to Fiji to Tonga to Samoa. That's like what I consider my home, the Pacific, and something that I'm very prideful about. All my
Yeah.
research is in it. And that's kind of where I want to return. The reason I chose Harvard Medical School is for the resources. What I think that the name, of Harvard kind of provides is kind of like both like the resources to kind of like engage in important work, but also like it creates almost like a podium for people to almost sit and kind of like listen, right? Like here are the problems in the world, and that's something that I want to put a spotlight on, right? Is to use these kind of resources and allocate them, and well, these are like academic and intellectual resources, and kind of like
Yeah.
allocate those to the Pacific. I also really appreciate the amount of amazing hospitals that are in the area, and being able to train with the individuals in that area as well, who are at some cases very uber specialized,
Yeah.
and it's like having like access to kind of like that technology, and the people who kind of like workshop these skills. It's very inspiring to want to make me want to like bring those
Of
and apply
course.
them
Yeah.
back in my home, and to kind of like bring that over. And so that was kind of like part of the decision making, right? Is like, Harvard has a very strong global health program. Let's see if we can expand that to the Pacific, and let me be that representation there for that. Um, yeah.
Well, that's super meaningful. I guess like kind of going back to your undergrad years, like is this something that you always had kind of in the back of your head, like coming in as a freshman, that you wanted to do medicine, or was it kind of something you developed over time?
Yeah.
I think if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong. You said like you didn't know. I think you were business, right?
Yeah, I was a business
Is that what it was?
major.
Okay, yeah, I
Yeah, I was in the
remember.
Santa
Yeah,
Clara Business School.
that's right. That's right.
For a little bit, for a little bit. But I one of the most, I guess like one of the most like driving factors into making me like want to pursue medicine. And it's so interesting. I've almost like 360 because I really like business now. But we talk about
Yeah,
it later. Is I really like I boxed, for Santa Clara boxing.
right. I remember that.
I sustained like a pretty significant concussion, and I remember I like called SU EMS,
Yeah,
and
miss.
this
Yeah.
guy Cooper Shear, who's actually in Boston with me. He's at the BI. He's a
Oh
resident
wow. Okay.
in internal medicine, but he responded, and I remember he was taking this history, and he did a physical on me, and I was like, oh, this is like the craziest like
Yeah.
stuff like I'd ever seen. Like this was so cool. How does he like know all this information? How does he know what to ask? And from there, I was hooked. I like applied literally the next month to join SU EMS. Loved it, every second of it, and I felt like every single kind of experience afterward kind of like validated that.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, like to me, it was like a mixture of luck, and a mixture of good timing. That these like events, like had happened, and I'm
Lined
very like
yourself up. Yeah.
blessed that
Of
I was
course. Yeah.
very lucky. That's what I want to put out there. I'm very lucky. No skill on my part. But yeah, no, I really found exposure through SU EMS. I found exposure through DEM, right? And I had joined DEM around the same time as SU EMS, and I think like both of those things kind of like helped like kind of like unveil like what is the possibility.
Yeah.
Like the big thing is like exposure is so important, and if you don't have exposure, right, it's really hard for you to imagine yourself in a career. Um, Man, I think that's why I think like what you're doing here with like your podcast is so important, because you're giving people that exposure, and um, like a lot of things are possible.
Of course. Yeah. Um, so I guess like that kind of leads me to another question I had, and something that you mentioned earlier, to like do things that you're genuinely passionate about, because I feel like you see a lot of people like these days do like a lot of checkbox like mentality, or like, okay,
Yeah,
I need this, and so I guess my question is, what were like a couple of the ECs or like extracurriculars that you did, that like you found most meaningful? I'm sure you get asked this question a lot, but like that you found most meaningful and you kind of talked to in your like med school interviews.
absolutely. Let's see. Most meaningful things that I've done. Um, I think the biggest thing. This is non-medical,
Hmm.
but the biggest thing that I will always remember about Santa Clara is having a large friend group, and having a good support system. That is like underrated, and I think that's the foundation of everything. If you have good people that you can talk to and lean on and
Hmm.
rely on,
Of course.
It'll make life easier because, the fact of the matter is if you're going to go into medicine, and this is something that I knew at the time, but I didn't know until didn't know until fully now. And I think as a resident, I'll even fully encapsulate it, but it's going to be hard. You're going to have to work hard.
Yeah.
I could never imagine as a hardworking pre-med that I'd be working this hard. And I'm sure as a resident, I'll be working even harder. But that's just kind of what we're set up for. It's just hard work and it's toil and it's grind. That being said, doesn't mean it doesn't have to be fun and that there can't be moments of joy and happiness. And so the most important thing is, finding a good support group and a support network. In terms of extracurriculars and whatever spreads out from that. So if you play intramurals, play intramurals. If you're someone who likes to cook, do that. Because more often than not, and you'd be surprised, those things come up on your interview. Because your interviewer will understand that they're giving you an interview because they've seen that you score well on tests, they've seen your GPA, and now they're trying to see if you're a fit, that you can talk to patients, that you have lived a life. And it's so funny because I boxed for a long time. That's where I found community, and I did a lot of martial arts, and that's what a lot of people ask me about.
What martial arts did you do?
I did jiu-jitsu and wrestling.
Okay, me too. I did those same two things.
Oh, right on, bro. Oh, so
My first wrestling practice. Oh man, I'll never forget that first wrestling practice. The hour of finish, I was counting the minutes. Straight to the bathroom. I was throwing up. Oh, it was awful. It was awful. Go ahead, though.
I don't want to return to those days.
Oh my gosh.
But find something you're really passionate about because they'll ask you about it, and there are a lot of things that you can draw from those experiences that help with medicine. That grind that you do in wrestling, that's hard work, determination.
Of course,
all of that applies to medicine. If you're a climber, maybe that's problem solving, creativity.
Definitely.
So whatever you do will apply to medicine. Now to the more I guess standard kind of extracurriculars, right? Big thing for me was clinical experience. And so having that bucket filled is probably the most important thing because that's what people want to hear you talk about. They want to hear you talk about how you interact with patients, the stories that you can tell, and the lessons you've learned about what patients are going through. And of course, that big E word, right, is empathy. So for me, that came in two flavors. One was I worked as an EMT for Santa Clara University. And so that was great. It was both volunteer and clinical experience. So it was a BOGO. And then second, I worked in the ED in Hawaii for kind of a summer program.
Okay.
And I got to do a lot of ED work. And that was also very fulfilling. But, a lot of people will put scribing, clinical assistant, medical assistant.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, all of that will sound very similar on paper. It's really the stories that you bring out.
Of course, yeah.
And that's what will set you apart. So clinical experience is major. The other things that I did that I thought were awesome, healthcare ethics internship, 10 out of 10.
Markula, yeah, I'm thinking about joining that, yeah.
Definitely do that.
Okay.
It gives you a way to talk about issues that are very pertinent in medicine, and it's essentially kind of current events of medicine, and it gets you up to speed with all the things that are happening, and it really helps a lot. And it's a very unique thing. Not many places have an ethics program, and a lot of schools like to see that. I did a clinical research project in Hawaii, and my project was looking at patients with multiple sclerosis and comparing. I think it was access to insurance, and tracing outcomes or something like that. But that was kind of my thing. So I, one of the buckets, right, is research. And I did research with Dr. Soljak in his lab. Highly recommend anyone in Santa Clara, if you're listening, top tier lab.
Yeah. But, what was it called again?
It was Dr. Soljak's.
Dr. Soljak's lab. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Instrumental chemistry. The main thing with research is, one, research is also a grind. So talk to as many professors as you can and find something that actually genuinely interests you. I love Dr. Soljak, but if that material isn't something that you're passionate about,
sure, it's monotonous.
Exactly. It's going to be work, right? Either way. So you want to do a topic that you're really interested in. publications, you don't need publications to go to medical school. They definitely help. I never got any publications. But try to be in a lab, and you can kind of get the vibe of this by talking to the PI or by talking to the students who are in the lab, who is at the very least presenting their findings, if not publishing. So if I had to put the hierarchy, it's like do something that you're really interested in because you're going to be grinding in that lab and like doing a lot of basic science, and then do something that that you'll get something out of it, right?
Yeah.
So like look for lab PIs who are wanting to mentor you, not wanting to kind of use your output.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Most people at Santa Clara are very, 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 very great at mentorship and will want you to succeed.
That's something I'm really grateful for, like especially coming to a school like this. It's so easy to like build like meaningful connections with like not only like just friends but like your professors as well. One question I had that kind of like went on my EC question, I guess, container. A couple months ago, like I got the chance to like shadow an orthopedic surgeon, which for me like was more based off of to see if I really like enjoyed like going into a surgery room or like kind of feeling that like the environment, and I loved it. But as far as like shadowing like as an EC, is that something that medical schools like really look for? And if they do, like I know it's really hard to like get those opportunities, so I'm not sure if that's like what you have any advice on
Shadowing
that.
is like one of those things that is like it's truly a checkbox. That's the only thing.
Is it really? Okay.
And some people will differ in my opinion.
Yeah.
Disclaimer, like definitely like get a second source for anything I say. But in my opinion, right, shadowing is one of those things that is truly a checkbox. Like it
Really?
doesn't
Okay.
show anything about you because you're in the observer role, right?
Yeah.
You're not making an initiative. You can reflect on it for sure. And you definitely should have it, right? You definitely should have time with doctors, talking with doctors. But don't beat yourself up if you don't have like $100.
Okay. I guess that makes sense, yeah. Because I feel like when I went and did it, it was more about like, okay, this is something I like. It's not really necessarily something I did. So I guess that makes a lot more sense, yeah.
Yeah, so it's good to have on your app, but no one will be talking about your shadowing experience in your interview.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then as far as like your ECs, like, did you have like a general idea of, okay, I need to have like this, I want to do something like this during that time or something like that as far as like planning it out, or was it more of like it just kind of came naturally?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question. Some people are better planners than me. My advice is you should definitely plan out your ECs, and to some degree, like using like the checkbox method can be helpful, especially in organizing. What I basically kind of just took opportunities I thought were interesting and I thought were cool. And so my analogy is like you kind of have like pots boiling. You ever make like a carbonara or like a pasta or something like that?
Yes.
So what is like the longest step in like making a pasta, right, is like boiling that water, right?
Yeah, right.
Right, while you do everything else. And that's kind of like how that like motto is kind of like how I view my ECs, right? It's like you'll have some pots on the stove that are just sitting and boiling, and occasionally you'll have to stir them. And then you'll have to like chop vegetables and stuff like that. And so if you're looking at all your extracurriculars, start with like one or two that are like long term. And usually that's like a long-term volunteering thing. Maybe you do like 5 hours a month, right? At the end of a year, that's 60 hours already. End of 4 years, that's 240 hours, right? That's a slow burn pot, right? Like you'll have a couple volunteering that's a slow burn pot. You'll have some research. That's something that's probably a bit more invasive. Maybe you're going in 3 times a week, right? That's like you chopping vegetables. And then slowly start adding more pots. And you'll start to get into a flow of certain things because there will be dry spells, right? There will be times where research isn't going or, you're volunteering maybe like shut down for a month. But always have something in the background kind of going. Maybe you'll have like a summer internship and that'll be your clinical experience. And, you'll have like things kind of in the foreground, right? And then you'll have things in the background. So start 1 or 2 extracurriculars and then see if you can handle it and then just slowly build on.
Okay. That's a really good way to think about it. Okay. Yeah. Wow. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
I feel like
And
that
have
makes it a
leadership.
lot.
Leadership is a big thing.
Yeah.
Whenever you're evaluating the value of an extracurricular activity, um, think about kind of like I get like like the three I's, right? It's like one, is this an opportunity for me to improve something, right? If you're volunteering, is there a way that I can not just volunteer and like be told what to do, but is there like a protocol I can write? Is there a way I can make this more efficient, right? Is there a way that I can help improve something? Is I another I is like innovate, right? Is there a way I can make this better? If you're working in a lab, does the PI let their older students kind of make modifications to the protocol? Am I doing something significant by doing that? Am I
Yeah.
allowed
That
to
makes
express
sense.
my creativity, right? And then like the other thing, right, is like I forgot the third I, but it has something to do with like leadership
Okay.
and like training. Like, am I allowed to like educate other people, teach other people, and like kind of like have them like even if I work at like retail, is this an opportunity for me to like kind of like manage people or like train them to do things
Yeah.
and pass it on. So you should always be looking for ways in which you can play an active role when you're kind of in like an extracurricular. Those are kind
Yeah.
of like your gold star extracurriculars.
Okay. And I feel like once you do that, like it'd be a lot more like impactful on you too, like as a person.
Exactly,
Um,
exactly.
yeah.
Always be
Okay.
looking for impact. Yeah.
Yeah. I know you mentioned earlier that you went in like blind, right? With your MCAT score, yeah. So my question is, as far as like medical schools, and I'm not sure if like the top tier medical schools, I don't even know what that means, but like I guess like the name brand medical schools, if they look at it differently. But how heavy is like stats waived versus ECs? Like, can you have your stats kind of, let's say you have really high stats, but like not too good ECs, or like vice versa? Like, do they counterbalance each other, or how does that kind of play out in like the admissions process?
Yeah, this is all conjecture, and like truly, every single admissions committee will say something different and have
Yeah,
like, different things that they'll view. So
fair
take this
enough.
all with a grain of salt. But in general, your stats don't define you. The general advice that I give to most people is that your stats are simply a ticket. They're kind of like an entry like an entryway, right? And so certain schools have higher stat threshold than others. Um, but just because you are below average doesn't mean you're not going to get in. It's an average for a reason, which means 50% of people are below average, right? But those are like if the average acceptance score is a 512, that means 50% of people are getting into medical school with below a 512. So that's like the
Mm,
first way you should like kind of like shift your frame view is that scores, they're important, right? But they simply are a ticket in, if that makes sense. What
yeah,
really will help you stay in a medical school's like radar and actually secure your bag is your extracurriculars, is your personal statement, and is your letters of recommendation,
I see.
if
Okay.
that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. So like,
And
okay, okay,
this
okay.
this is yeah, this is a generalization. There might be a situation that I can imagine where you have two similar applicants with very similar compelling narratives, and one of them has a higher MCAT score. Those things happen, right? And unfortunately, because of limited seats, like someone has to be taken. But by and large, I think if you have someone with like a 518 and someone with like a 5, 14, right? One is like significantly lower, right? But if the one with the 514 has a true compelling narrative and reason to go into medicine, and they have incredible extracurriculars, they've clearly put a lot of time into it, they have unique things, they have leadership, that person is most likely going to get in over the 518. I'd say stats are like a threshold, if anything.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. And then kind of like going back on what you talked about with the opportunity you had back, you said you worked, what was it again that you did that research paper with, or with MS? How were you, yeah,
Yeah,
how
I
were
did
you
like
able
a.
to, please, yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, sorry. What was your question?
It was like, how were you able to kind of find that connection or get that network going so you can like be a part of something like impactful as that?
That's a really good question. As a undergrad, there's like three ways that you can do so to get involved with like clinical research, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what like basic science research, this is just for like the people at home, like basic science research, anything in the lab with like pipetting and stuff like that. Clinical science research is looking at like clinical outcomes and data with patients. So to get involved with basic science research, you ask your professors, you make connections that way. Clinical research, there's kind of like two ways that pre-meds get involved. One is through clinical research programs. These are usually summer programs, and a lot of schools offer them. Like Hopkins has a clinical summer research program. Some hospitals, like MGH and Boston Children's Hospital, have summer research programs. Stanford has a summer research program, and this is just Michigan has a summer research program. This is something that you just, during January or December, you start Googling and compiling a list of summer researches that you want to apply to, and then just apply to those. I happen to be in that category. I applied to a summer research program in Hawaii. It was a neuroscience summer research program. So look at the local offerings that are in your state. And then think about like the big names, like Stanford, Harvard, some of the bigger hospitals, and see if they have student summer research programs for undergrads and pre-meds, because a lot of places do, and they'll pay you and they'll fully fund you. The second way that I've also seen done is you cold call, and a lot of my mentees, this is how I get them involved in research. We find a professor or a doctor that is actively publishing or involved in research, and we just email them.
Yeah.
And, I'd say a good amount of the time, if they have space, they're more than willing to at least talk and hear you out and potentially put you on a project. But a lot of students are involved with just with particular mentors through kind of like either connections or cold emailing. Connections are way easier, because this honestly, it's a privileged thing for me to say. It requires you to be connected with someone, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, right. It's
huge.
Tough. It's tough.
Tough.
But that's one way, right? Is like connections through like LinkedIn or through like a friend or through a professor that knows someone. And the second way, right, is cold emailing. And I've cold emailed professors or PIs in their labs. And so it works. You'll have a high rejection rate, but if you're persistent enough, it will work. I know some folks in undergrad who've done very similar things and have got some very, very great research projects and found great mentorship from that.
Okay, cool. That's really good to know, because I was super interested in like doing some sort of like clinical research like during my sophomore year. Because I wanted to get like kind of some volunteering back home with like a hospital that I kind of did some volunteering with in high school, and then get my EMT license hopefully. But that's like that clarifies a lot, I guess, like kind of the process of trying to like get that clinical research. It's like something that I want to do. And then as far as like your kind of ECs and like going more off of that, is there anything, it doesn't, not even necessarily ECs actually, but is there anything in general for your undergrad that you regret doing or not doing? And I guess this is more like, doesn't even have to be med school related, or like just like anything in general.
Regret doing?
Or not doing.
Or
yeah,
not
one of the two, yeah.
Ooh. Dude, there was this time, dude, where I could have been a firefighter. I kind of regret that.
That would have been so cool.
Yeah, there was like when the wildfires were going on, I actually submitted an application to because I had my EMT license. To go out in the wildfires and like just like be at the.
That would have been so cool.
Yeah, I regret not doing that. I also regret not working in a kitchen. I wish I did that. I like cooking, and so I also watched The Bear recently.
What is that?
Dude, you should watch The Bear. It's on Hulu.
Tell me about it. Yeah.
It's like this like really intense cooking show. It's like a drama. It's so good.
Okay.
But kind of wish I worked in a kitchen for a little bit.
Yeah.
But no, in general, I think like most of the things, I'm pretty happy with. Definitely wish I did more cultural shows. I did like barcadas and like club stuff.
They
No,
put
yeah,
some
what's
good
your name?
shows. I've been a
Yeah.
couple of those. No, it's
Hey,
so
you
fun.
know.
It's the funniest thing. I love it. I love it. A lot of
Yeah,
the people in Dem are like really involved too, so it's like really cool to see him go out. Uh,
that's tight, man.
no,
That's
it's
tight.
funny. It's funny.
Oh yeah, Sam Perez. Yeah, he's
Oh
been.
yeah, yeah. I don't know if you know
No.
Bradley. He just got he's president now, but he's also like super involved in like I know I've seen him last time go on one of the culture shows. It was really cool.
That's tight. That's tight.
Um, and then like okay, I have this other question. It kind of like deviates from like the whole med school talk, but like it was about your business, kind of your interest in business. Because for me personally, like I was super interested in business before I even came to Santa Clara. This was like during my like high school, like junior to senior year. Like me and my friend would like do like really cool business thing. We opened up like a pressure washing business. Like we did a lot of like cool things. It was just something that I like really wanted to do.
Yeah.
I always wanted to go into like medicine, like in the back of my head, but like business was like a super big thing. So I'm kind of like curious on like how that kind of played out for you and like how it's playing now. Because I
That's a good
think you
question.
said like it's coming back to you, right?
Yeah, it's coming
Yeah,
back
or
to
your
me.
interest, yeah.
I think I don't know, a lot of the issues in healthcare, I think at a macro level are
Yeah,
because of uh, inoptimal, business strategy. We're not on
of
a
course, yeah.
universal healthcare system, right? We
On
live
the
in a
bigger
very,
institution level, you mean?
oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that makes
Uh,
sense.
people are uninsured. People don't have access to care. People refuse to seek care, and that results in ultimately worse outcomes, right? Longer
Yeah.
ICU stays, longer hospitalization stays, worse prognosis for surgery if you have later presentation, right? There's so much like literature and data on the link between access to care and outcomes. And access is a public health issue, but it's
Of
also
course.
an issue of business. How do we fund things? How do we move things? And the way that our current healthcare system, and I could talk on and on about this, but the way our current healthcare system is constructed isn't conducive um, to the health of people.
Hmm.
It's very conducive to profit.
Yeah.
Um,
I think we're
Similarly,
feeling that now. Yeah.
dude,
Yeah.
100%, man.
Yeah.
Similarly speaking, we have a lot of great innovation from the biotech and the pharmaceutical sphere, like incredible innovation. And
Definitely.
there are
Yeah.
some awesome like drugs, like these like really awesome biologics for all these and immunotherapies and oncologic
Hmm.
drugs, as well as like like the Da Vinci for like surgery from the body.
Yeah. Yeah.
But all of that costs money, and it's disproportionately placed on the consumer. And you'll have something like shoot, like an EpiPen costs like $400 for
Right. Yeah.
something that is like very cheap to synthesize. So there's a lot of problems, and I think business is one way to deal with that. I don't know if we can fully divorce ourselves from profit, because there are stakeholders, but I think part of the reason why doctors are in the situation they are, why private equity is buying up ED practices and
Yeah.
ruining kind of like outcomes in those areas, and why um, a lot of doctors spend so much time, dealing with prior authorizations from insurance companies. I
Yeah.
think part of the reason why that's the case is because doctors didn't have enough understanding of business and the forces that kind of are larger than them. And so that's kind of what interests me, right? Is that intersection, and how
That's
can we
kind.
like craft like healthcare systems that can be more resilient and like give access to people who need it, while also like being cognizant of the economic forces that kind of drive supply and demand and whatnot.
Right. That's exactly the reason I asked because like, in my opinion, like in my eyes, I guess you can make so much impact like being a doctor or like being a surgeon or whatever that looks like for whoever's doing it or what their path looks like. But to me, I feel like you can make a lot more like impact to like on a larger scale if you have like some sort of business implemented. Because I feel like now these days like everything is business, and we're seeing that now. Like especially like, I mean, I could talk kind of personally about it since
Yeah.
like on Santa Clara. Like I know after they cut our funding, like I was supposed to work in a research lab this summer, and unfortunately like they had to like put it back because like the funding got cut. Um, And so like it's just kind of unfortunate that that's the case. But that's kind of like the reason I was asking. Like I wanted to get your opinions on like what you thought that looked like.
No, I appreciate you sharing that with me.
No.
Sorry that the funding got cut. That's terrible.
No, it's fine. I mean, it's getting like figured out now, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's just crazy how everything is kind of moving. Um, yeah, I guess I could talk forever about
Of course.
that. Yeah. All right. Well, I want to be meaningful of your time. It's like 45 minutes, so I appreciate you so much
Absolutely.
for coming
If you
on.
have other questions, I'm good for a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Let me see. I have a couple of maybe if I have a couple of other questions. Yeah. So for MCAT as well, or kind of like for the application process, I spoke to a couple of like juniors and seniors who are kind of like getting closer to that. What did like planning for you look like? How did you kind of take steps into planning, like when you actually got closer and you're like, okay, now I need to like start writing my personal statement, taking this like exam and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, what
That's a great
helped you in
question.
kind of like doing that?
The big, the first thing that you got to do is like commit, right? The first thing you do is commit, right? Is like you set like a date. Like, um, typically, applications open like last week of May, first week of June, and so you set that date, right? Like, I'm going to matriculate in 2028, so I need to apply in June 1st of 2027, right? 1 year before I matriculate.
Hmm.
Once you set that date, you work backwards. So I know I need to have all of my application done by this date, right?
Okay.
So when am I going to have my first draft by my personal statement done? Work backwards.
Okay.
And then probably the biggest thing though is like setting like when am I going to take my MCAT? And so if you want to apply with your score, if you like, had your date set June 1st, right? The latest day you could take your MCAT and like apply by June 1st is probably like May 1st or, April, last week of April, something like that. So then, right, you have your date, which is like April 30th. You're going to take your MCAT that day. Then you create your schedule
Okay.
for MCAT. And typically what that looks like is the first thing
So you
you
work
need-
backwards.
you work backwards.
Okay, okay.
Exactly. First thing you need to do is evaluate your life, right? And what I mean by that is like, am I going to be taking my MCAT in during a break, or am I going to be doing classes the whole time? Will I have do I have family obligations during this time? Is this a particular time where I want to like train for a marathon? Right? These are all very important life things that you need to account for when you're like planning for your MCAT, because that'll dictate your study style and how you strategically go about it. The way I did it, and there are many ways to do it. I think one number that I saw recommended was like 300 to 400 hours or something like that total. And so if you spread that out over a certain amount of time, so let's say like you were doing like a dedicated period of time where it's like I'm only studying for the MCAT every single day, right? Let's like do this kind of like math. Let's say 400 hours divided by like 60 days, right? That's 6 hours a day, right? So that would be 2 months of studying. Like I'm only studying for the MCAT. That would be like studying for the MCAT during the summer, right? You'd be like studying
Okay.
like 6 to 8 hours a day. What I did was, because I applied straight through,
Yeah.
I was like, I'm gonna do those the same amount of hours, but I'm gonna break it apart over 9 months. So, quick math for me. It's like 30 times 9, that's 270 days. 400 divided by 270. Yeah, I studied roughly like 1 to 2 hours a day, right? And so you
But on
kinda
like a larger scale.
exactly
Like on a
the
larger
scale,
time
but
period.
the same
Okay.
amount of work is being done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you kind of like create that base. You kind of create your own personalized schedule based on, your needs and your days. And maybe you're gonna take a vacation. So like put that in there. Maybe like and also put like time for like when like excuse my language, like when shit happens, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
never know, man. Like your family might have like a problem, and that's important. You have to deal with that. So block that out, and block out time to also like take care of yourself. So set your MCAT date, work backwards. There are two phases of MCAT studying. There's 50% is content review, which is kind of like going through like the passages and like reading through like the actual like sections, like, oh, this is like an ionic bond, this is glycolysis. And then 50% is just questions, and you just rip questions. And that's ultimately where you get the most amount of growth, is in that last stage of exam prep, is doing question banks and doing practice tests. And that's where you see your most amount of growth, because in my opinion, the MCAT doesn't show that you're intelligent, or it doesn't show that you're smart. What it shows is that you're a good test taker. And so you can have the fastest person in the world, right? Like Usain Bolt. But if he's not training to play American football,
Doesn't mean anything.
right, it doesn't mean anything. You can be the fastest guy but be a terrible running back, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing with the MCAT. The MCAT
Okay.
is, intelligence helps you, but it's really just working on how to take a test. And that's why the MCAT isn't necessarily the best predictor, I think, of like if you're going to be a good doctor or not, or if
No.
you're a smart person. I think it means nothing. I think the only thing
So
it
it's
means
just
is
purely test taking? Is it?
Exactly.
Wow. Okay.
But that's kind of why, to break down like the secret of taking the MCAT is like doing more practice tests and doing more questions makes
Yeah.
you better, as opposed to like studying like how you'd study for a class,
Okay.
Different
And then,
goals.
yeah. And then as far as like planning all of it, because you said you went straight, like you didn't take a gap year, right? Um, and then I'm kind of like on that same mindset. I'm leaning more towards of not taking a gap year. As far as like kind of dealing with all of this, did you have any like work-life balance issues, like burnout issues or anything like that? And if you did or didn't, like how did you like mitigate or kind of, or how did you like try to get out of that problem?
That's a good question. I think during the application process, I did not have work-life issues. I think there are definitely times I had to like sacrifice, and you just kind of have to. Everyone kind of has like a range of what they have to sacrifice. So there are definitely events that I missed that I was like bummed about. But
Yeah.
overall, I had a great support system. I was able to hang
Yeah.
out with my friends, go out and box and do what I wanted to do that made me happy while doing that. And I think part of it was because I spread it out, right? Like 2 hours a day isn't the worst thing ever. There will be times, right, like you're gonna like have to just like crunch down. So like
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks before the exam, I was definitely like pedal to the metal. But
Yeah.
most of like my time was like well spent, was good. I would say the work-life balance kind of comes now, interestingly enough.
Okay. Okay.
I would highly recommend, if this is right for you, I want to destigmatize taking gap years. As
Yeah.
someone who hasn't taken a gap year, I want to say like gap years can be some of the most valuable things you can do, because it gives you perspective. And take it from me, like I'm kind of like going down the medicine route, and I've just found out that I'm like interested in like tech and like business and like
Yeah.
that. But now I don't have like time to explore it to the depth that I want it, right?
Yeah.
Because now I'm like, once you're on like the medical school train, you kind of
You're not getting off yet.
gap year is like important. And
Yeah.
some old heads will be like, oh, it's like a waste of time. I completely disagree. I think you can make it meaningful,
Yeah.
whether that's traveling or working in a lab that you think is really cool, or living in another place, or if like you like want to be a paramedic, doing something like that. And all of those skills will help you in medical school, and they'll make you unique, and they'll make you better able to relate and take care of your patients, which is
Yeah.
what it's all about at the end.
I didn't think about it like that. Yeah. Like I guess like also I feel like if you have like any underlying like things that are passions that maybe you haven't even experienced, that would be the time to do it as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. You want to like just train, like get
Yeah.
A little bit after, just
Yeah.
fight a fire, something like that.
Right, right. My other thing is like, okay, I guess like I asked like a lot of questions about the undergrad process. And I don't really have a picture. I mean, I have like a canvas of what medical school even looks like. So like my question is for you, like kind of going in, what does medical school look like? What is like kind of the things that you're involved in like right now?
That's a great question. So broadly speaking, medical school is divided into kind of like 3 stages. Your first stage is like your didactic. So most schools will have 1.5 to 2 years of didactic, and that's just kind of like sitting in a classroom and learning about the human body and disease and pathology by organ system. That's like very standard across the country. Some schools are moving towards a 1-year model, as it's been deemed more and more that med school is unnecessarily long and doesn't need to be 4 years. So our school is a 1-year model. So we have 1 year of didactic where things are a lot more condensed. After your first year of didactic, which is mostly in the classroom with some like clinical exposure, you take step one. And step one is kind of like your first big exam. And that's like your first board exam. That's a pass-fail exam, and it's a beast. It's an absolute beast. It absolutely makes the MCAT look very easy in comparison. Interestingly enough.
Okay, it's good to look forward to. Okay.
It's great to look forward to. But most people pass it because it's pass-fail.
Okay,
And
right.
so it's hard, but you'll be surprised that it's very doable.
Okay.
Then you get into your second and third years, which are clinical rotations. Clinical rotations are when you rotate on all of what they consider like the core primary services. So like internal medicine, surgery, neurology, OB-GYN, psychiatry, and in some places like radiology, emergency med, and pediatrics. So you rotate through those for like a year. And that's kind of like where you're spending time in the hospital. You're learning how to take care of patients. You're learning how to present patients. You're doing small procedures. And you're learning like the act of being a doctor. It's very different from shadowing. In some cases, it depends on your preceptor. In some cases, it's more close to shadowing. In other cases, you're almost acting as the level of the functional intern. And so you're getting this graduated responsibility, and the more confident you get and the more you're able to show, the more you can, start to actually act like a doctor, do physical exams, read imaging, interpret labs. And that's honestly the biggest bang for your buck is there. Anyone can learn all of that medical school didactic stuff online on YouTube, third party. But really the value of medical school comes in those early like clinical rotations where you're actually doing the work of being a doctor. Your third year, you do electives and then you do sub-Is. And so a sub-internship is kind of like a tryout. It's kind of like we're going to treat you like an intern and we're going to treat you like a resident. And so it's kind of like when you find like your specialty that you want to match to, then you do sub-Is in that specialty. And that's kind of like how they evaluate you. Like if you're into orthopedics, you would do an orthopedic sub-I at the place that you want to go to. And you're essentially trying out.
Yeah.
Through that time, you're also taking step 2, which is graded, which is all clinical knowledge.
Okay.
Easier than step 1.
Okay. So,
Way easier than step 1. Yeah. And then fourth year is really just interview season. So right now I'm in my third year, and I'm doing my sub-Is. And so I'm on the surgical ICU, and I'm getting rocked.
Sick. Is it cool?
It's cool. I'm getting rocked. Yeah, I'm trying to survive. But
it's fun.
It's fun.
I guess that's where that work-life balance really comes to play.
Yeah, right now I have no work-life balance. You know what? It's funny though.
Yeah.
I think there's always work-life balance to be had.
Yeah, that's true.
You just gotta find it.
Yeah.
And you have to be like willing.
Some places it's harder to find than the others, I guess.
Yeah, before this I went to the gym, which was cool.
Yeah.
And like I'm going to a concert on Thursday.
Okay,
what I'm
nice.
sacrificing by going to that concert though is sleep.
Okay.
So there's a sacrifice.
Yeah.
But I didn't see
Mental health is important. Mental health is important. Go to that concert.
100%.
What concert is it?
I'm going to Harry Mack. I don't know if you know
Okay.
Harry Mack.
I don't.
He's like a rapper.
Okay.
But I'm going with some boys that I hadn't seen in a while.
Nice. Okay, that's sick.
I was like, I had to, and you'll make these sacrifices and these choices. Like, do I want to, sleep extra, or do I want to invest in this personal relationship I have?
Go to Harry Mack with the boys. Yeah.
Harry Mack with the boys. And that's where the work-life balance.
Yeah.
But
course.
there will be times undoubtedly where you're just gonna have to grind. But there's gonna be a lot of times where there's gonna be like happiness and freedom and just like joy and
Definitely.
fun and vibe.
Yeah.
So good and the bad. Yeah.
That's great. Okay. Okay. Cool. I think that's all the questions I have. Um,
All right, man. I
I think
appreciate you,
I'm
dude.
trying to think of anything else, but yeah, I have all. That's all the questions. It was great to have you on, and hopefully, like in the future, we could do this again. This has been like really fun. Yeah,
Dude,
I
I'd
enjoyed.
love to, man. I mean, like, if yeah, dude. I mean, personally, bro, if you want to like reach out to me offline, we could talk story through anything. Just let me know, man.
Definitely. That would be amazing. Yeah, I'll definitely keep connected with you. Go on.
Yeah, yeah, go on. I'd say like,
I appreciate it.
last
Yeah, please.
words, right?
Yeah,
Like
please.
it's like truly a long journey. So like, enjoy it and like make time to like, have fun and go to
Yeah.
Harry Mack with the boys.
Yeah, there you go. If you get anything out of this, go to Harry Mack
Go
with the
to Harry
boys.
Mack with the
I
boys.
like that. I guess kind of like one really really quick question is, would you if you could go back to like your undergrad years and like tell your kid, like tell yourself something, what would it be? Like any advice, anything you would give yourself to go back into time into like my position, or like maybe someone who's a sophomore or a junior or something like that.
I'd probably be like, don't live in Casa in second year.
Okay.
Nah, man, I had like a really good time. Um, I would have probably, I probably would have done more extracurriculars, actually, now that I think
Okay.
about it. Now that I know what like my time management, if I had my time management now, because I had so much free time back then, I would
Yeah.
do more
Yeah.
things. Like I'd pick up more
Okay.
hobbies. Like I'd play ultimate frisbee. I'd play
Yeah.
like bass guitar. I would like pick up more hobbies and
Yeah.
develop those now. Because like now it's harder to pick up hobbies and because you have to learn them, right? And
Right.
that takes time. But like if I'm like proficient
Just
at like
having fun.
spearfishing or
Yeah.
something, then I
Yeah.
could just go out for an hour and do it instead of like having to like put in an investment. So like any hobbies that you guys want to do like right now or skills, whether that's like
Yeah.
basket weaving or like playing basketball or whatever, like develop them now when you have all the time, so that when you're busy later on, you can just do them for fun. You don't have to learn them. That's what
Yeah.
I would do actually.
Okay, okay, okay. That's actually really good advice. Sounds good. And now that you mentioned Casa, it reminds me of I missed my room selection. So now I have to. I'm hoping I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I don't live in like Swig or something like
Yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
I'm sure you remember those days.
Of course, brother. Of course.
All right. Well, I appreciate you so much. I'll definitely keep you connected, and hopefully we can talk again soon.
All right, my brother.
It's
Take
been
care.
great.